Hi there, my name is Wendy and in this video I'm going to show you how to make the UK half treble stitch. This stitch is also known as a half double crochet if you are following American stitch terminology. The pattern abbreviations for the half double treble stitch are HTR, and if you are following the American stitch terminology and calling this stitch a half double crochet, then the abbreviations become HDC. The chart symbol, however, is the same for both the UK and American stitched name, and that is represented by this T shape that you can see in the diagram to the side. If we take a look at this sample here, we can see that we've got a short row of stitches worked in pink along this line. Now, these are UK double crochet stitches, and they are the shortest of the main stitch group. And then if we look at the top, we've got a taller set of stitches with more height, and these are UK treble stitches. So the UK treble stitches and the double crochet stitches are the most used stitches in general crochet. And then the half double crochet just sits between the two. It's a bit higher, it's got a little bit more height than a double crochet stitch, but it's not as tall, it hasn't got as much height as the treble stitch. So what I'm going to do now is bring the overhead camera in, and I'm going to work a row of half trebles in a foundation chain for you, and then I'm going to turn and work in the row below that I've just made. Just before we make a start, this is the right-handed version of the video, so if you're left-handed, I'll put a link in here and in the notes below so that you can go to the left-handed version of this tutorial. Now, the first thing that I've done is to make a slip knot and a short foundation chain, but I'm also going to put a link in here and in the notes below again, this time for a video on making a slip knot and making a chain in case you need to recap on this. So when we're making a half treble into a foundation chain, we're going to not count the stitch that's on the hook, and we're going to miss the first 2 stitches underneath the hook. Now I'm going to be working in one side of the chain, and that's going to be the side of the chain which is sitting towards the top when I turn the chain sideways. So I'm going to take my yarn up the back of the hook, over the top and down the front, and then I'm going to take my yarn so that it's laying at the back of the chain. I don't want my yarn in front of the chain. So I've got my yarn like that. I'm going to miss the first 2 chain underneath the hook, and I'm going to put my hook through the top side of the chain, and then I'm going to put my yarn up and over the hook and down the front. This is called a yarn over. And then I'm going to draw that hook back through, and I've got 3 stitches on my hook. Now I'm going to take the yarn over the hook, and then I'm going to draw it back through all 3 stitches back to 1 stitch. So now I'm going to move on to my next chain. So I'm going to take the yarn up the back, over the top, down the front of the hook, and then the yarn goes to the back of the chain. It sits behind that chain. And then I'm going to take my hook from the front to the back through the top side of the chain. And then the yarn comes over the hook and down again. And then I can pull that hook back through, and I've got 3 stitches on my hook. Then I'm going to take the yarn over the hook and pull it back through. Now, I always talk about crochet stitches as being in 2 halves. We've got the building side, which is increasing from 1 stitch on our hook to however many we need, and then the decreasing side, taking it back down to 1 stitch on our hook again. So for our increasing side of the stitch, we're going to take the yarn over the hook, through the stitch, then the yarn goes over the hook again, and we can pull that hook back through, and we've got the 3 stitches on our hook, and that is the first half of our stitch made. We've gone from having 1 stitch on our hook now to 3. So now for our decreasing part of the stitch, we're going to take the yarn up over the top of the hook and down the front again. That's called our yarn over, and then we're going to scoop that hook back and draw it through all 3. So I'm going to do this again. Yarn comes up over the top of the hook, down the front and to the back of our work, which is called the yarn over. Then the hook goes through the top side of the chain. Then the yarn goes over the hook again, and then we draw that hook back through, and we have 3 stitches on our hook, and that's the first half of our stitch made. Then the yarn comes up the top, over the front, and then we just scoop it back through all 3, bringing it back to 1 stitch on our hook. So to do it again, yarn comes up the back of the hook, over the top, down the front, behind our chain, and then we're going to take our hook, and from the front to the back we're going through the middle of the chain through that top side of the stitch, and then the yarn goes over the hook and we pull that hook back through, and we've got 3 stitches on our hook, first half of our stitch made. Then we just take our yarn up over the top and down the front, and then we just draw it through all 3 stitches at once, taking it back to 1 stitch on our hook. So I'm going to do that once more, and I'm at the end of my foundation chain. So it's yarn up the back, over the top, down the front, and then the hook goes from the front to the back. Yarn goes over the hook again, and then I can draw that back through, and I've got 3 stitches on my hook. So again, that's the first half of my stitch made, and then to finish it off, it's yarn up over the top, down the front, and then draw back through all 3 stitches on my hook. Now when we get to the end of our foundation chain, you'll see we have this small tiny stitch at the end, that's our slip knot, and we don't need to be working into that. So now I'm ready to turn my work. Now whenever you're going to start a row using the half treble stitch, you need to make a turning chain of 2. So I'm going to make 2 chain. And the reason that we do this is if we don't make this chain, our work is going to be very pinched at the edges. So we've made 2 chain, and then we're going to miss the 2 chain that we've just made, and then we're going to start our next row, and we're going to be working through both sides of the stitch. So now we can see that we have this V that we're looking at, where the hook has gone through both sides of the stitch. So it's yarn up the back, over the top, down the front and to the back of the work, and this is known as a yarn over. We're going to miss these 2 chain that we've just made and work into our first stitch. So I've gone through both sides of the V, yarn over the hook, pull it back through, and I've got 3 stitches on my hook, then yarn over the hook and pull it completely through to 1. So to do this again, it's yarn up the back, over the top, down the front and behind the work. This is our yarn over, and then we're going to take our hook and we're going to put it through both sides of the V, so we can see that we've got that little gap there, and then the yarn goes over the hook again. We scoop back through to 3 stitches on our hook, and then it's yarn over and completely bring it straight back through to 1 stitch on our hook. So I'll do this once more, yarn up the back, over the top, down the front, yarn to the back of the work, hook goes through both sides of the next stitch, yarn goes over the hook, bring it back to 3 stitches on your hook. Now you can finish off, yarn over the hook and draw it back through all 3. So I always like to think of making a half treble stitch is that we're working the first half of the stitch in exactly the same way as making a normal treble, and then just simply drawing through to 1. So that's the basics of making the UK half treble stitch. I hope that's helped you understand the stitch, the abbreviations and the chart symbol. So happy crocheting for now, and see you soon. Bye.